Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse. This is Season 5, Episode number 14. Today is Sunday, March the 18th, 2018. My name is Graham Parrow. Over there is Melissa Daphne, and over there is Tyler Fitch. Sorry we didn't have a show last week. We had all kinds of scheduling issues. Tyler was in San Francisco, I believe, and thought he was going to be able to make it on Tuesday, and then couldn't make it on Tuesday, and then I was unavailable, and so it just kind of never happened. So we've got a bunch to cover this week because we have 2 weeks worth of stuff. So before we get to the games of the past couple of weeks, there was a couple of pieces of news. These were actually both from last week that we were going to talk about, but we'll get to them now. The first one was some detective work by a guy who goes by the name of Corporal, and I meant to grab his real name and I forgot what it is, but he's just known as Corporal. Minnesota Swarm fan. Been around for a long time, actually. And he did some detective work and found that the National Lacrosse League has filed registered trademarks for 2 different team names, one of which is the Boston Shamrocks and one is the Halifax Privateers. So this is obviously leading to the conclusion or the assumption that those are the next 2 teams to join the league, likely in 2021. So we've got Philadelphia and San Jose joining next year, and presumably Boston and Halifax will be the year after that.
San Diego,
What did I say?
San Jose.
One of those
Been there,
California places. Yeah, that may be the new Edmonton, Saskatchewan thing, I guess, for me. It's one of those San places, San Rafael. I don't know where that is. Anyway, yeah, so NLL possibly returning to Boston and then giving the east coast of Canada a try. My first thought about Halifax was it's way far from anywhere else. It's going to be like an hour or 2-hour flight from even the easternmost teams that we have now. And it's not a place that has any other pro sports teams of any kind. Like the CFL isn't even there. I imagine they probably have some minor league hockey out there, but I have no idea how well it does. So, but you could have said the same thing about Saskatoon a couple of years ago, and they seem to be doing okay. And they are also a couple of hour flight from anywhere. So, does it matter? Maybe not. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I'm a little more optimistic with the work that Nick Sakevich has done over the past few years to do more due diligence. And it seemed that when Jennings was growing the league about 10 years ago, anybody that came forward and said, I've got the money to pay the expansion fee, got a team. And then we'll do the due diligence later. Or heck, it's lacrosse. Everybody loves lacrosse. They'll just get people out there and we'll turn it into another Denver. And in a couple of cases, it worked pretty well, like Calgary, and in a bunch of places it didn't work at all. So I think Sakevich is doing a lot more work to make sure that expansion franchises, first of all, have a lot more time, and they do a lot more work to make sure that the owner knows what they're doing and is. And that might have been otherwise. What do you guys think?
Pick one.
Go ahead, Tyler.
Okay. I look at this list. I don't love the Boston Shamrocks name. They've already done Chicago Shamrocks with an X in the past. We've got the Victoria Shamrocks playing in the summer. Not that the summer names have to have any relevance to the NL names. But you've got the Boston Blazers. Alas, they've done it twice, and maybe the second time somebody took the name with them as they went away and won't give it back up. But it's only a slight concern I have there. And where will they play? Halifax Privateers is actually a pretty cool name. They can have some fun with that. The rumor I'm starting based on seeing this is that Toronto will be joining the Western Conference to help balance things out because literally everybody's further east than them now. So we'll see how that works out. But I like to see the league grow. 4 teams in a couple of years. I think they should hit the brakes after that and reacclimate for a while. But we'll see what they choose to do. What do you think, Melissa?
Definitely interesting. I feel I don't remember if there was a Boston team at some point named the Shamrocks or something, but I remember when Chicago came around, there was some noise about how Boston was a better fit for the name. And I think even when Chicago folded, because I think Boston came, there's been so much flux, I can't even keep it straight in my head. But I feel like after the Shamrocks folded, it was before the Blazers, and somebody was like, "Oh, the Boston needs to take the name because it's more fitting because there's such an American Irish population." But it's yeah, it's an interesting choice. I mean, as Tyler already said, we have had the Chicago Shamrocks and we have Victoria Shamrocks in a different league. So, yeah, but it's also one of those things, as St. Patty's Day shows. Everybody likes the Irish, right? There's tons of us. So it also might sell well just because of that, especially in Boston. So that might be a great marketing point right off the bat for them. With Halifax Privateers, I'll admit, American stupidity, I'm not as familiar with Halifax other than by the name. So I can't speak much to that, but I also didn't know where Saskatoon was until, or, even how far these cities are, because for us in Colorado, when somebody says something's near, it's very different than on the East Coast. You're driving 9 hours and you're still in my state, whereas on the East Coast, you're 9 hours and you've passed through maybe 5 states. So that distance is relative. So it doesn't matter. I'm digressing. Sorry, I've been grading all day, brain's mush. But it's interesting. I'm not sure if I like that we're doing 2 teams again so quickly, but for all we know, it actually might be 2 years down the road. We don't know. It's so much speculation at this point. So we could be jumping the gun, talking about them for, the year next season after. So it will be interesting. It's exciting to see the league growing, but as we were just discussing, there's been so much fluctuation, so much expansion, retraction, expansion, retraction. It's an unstable league. But then we also have to remember the NFL and the NBA and the MLB, they all went through these same growing pains, and look where they are now. So it's a good sign. Now that I think I've rambled enough, go ahead and take it over, Graham.
All right. I had something I was going to say about Halifax, and now I forget what it was, but I will get back to it if I remember. Just, I guess, to expand on what Melissa was saying, I don't know what a privateer is either. So I've been to Halifax, but it was a long, long time ago, and I don't really have a good idea of how big the city is. I don't think it's vastly different in size from Saskatoon, though. It's not a Montreal, Quebec City sized city. But I don't know what a privateer is, so maybe we'll have to look that up. And
it's like a Minuteman, somebody who's like an old timey fighter person.
Oh, I thought maybe it was like a pirate.
No, I think it's like a kind of a woodsy, like a woodsman-y, old timey, used a musket person.
All right, I'll buy that. All right, the other piece of news that I guess we can mention is that Colorado has also clinched a spot in the playoffs. Saskatchewan did this a couple of weeks ago, and then Colorado did this last week. I believe the magic number for Calgary to clinch the third and final spot in the West is 1. So if they win at all, or Vancouver loses at all for the rest of the season, then Calgary's in. And then compare that to the East, where we may not know anything about who makes it into the playoffs in the East Division until possibly the last week of the season, because it's so close in the East. I was going to have the standings, and where are we? We have a 6-5, a 6-6, and 3 6-7s in the East. So
I've never
1 game
seen
separates first and fourth. That's insane.
5 teams have the same number of wins. It's pretty bonkers.
There was a season, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, where 4 different teams in one division finished 6-10, and I can't remember what the other was. They were all either 6-10 or 10-6. I can't remember which, but 4 teams were tied, and there was a 4-way tie break to try and figure out who made the playoffs, because the other team, I believe, was ahead of all 4 of those, but I can't remember But it's certainly possible for that to happen again. I mean, Georgia was in first place last week, and I think even part of this week. And then they lost today, and now, according to my list, they are tied for third and technically in last, but I'm not sure I have the tiebreakers all right in my little program here. But in any case, moving from first to last in the East is very easy, whereas the West is pretty close to set already. So, but I believe Colorado could still catch Saskatchewan with a couple of wins, and Saskatchewan has to lose a few. So it's not entirely set in the West either, but it's a lot closer. All right, we've got a bunch of games to talk about. We'll just go over them quickly. We had Rochester over Georgia in overtime. This is last weekend. Colorado over Calgary by 1, and New England over Toronto also in overtime. So only 2 overtime games, but 3 one-goal games last weekend. And then this weekend, we had Toronto getting revenge on New England. Saskatchewan beat Buffalo. Calgary over Rochester. Colorado over Vancouver. And this afternoon, Georgia beat Buffalo 14-10. So we'll get into our awesome and not awesome for the week. And I guess I'll start. I'll start with the games last weekend, the 3 one-goal games, 2 of them in overtime. They were just really entertaining games. I enjoyed all 3 of them. Overtime games are always fun. All 3 of them were really close the whole game. Like, none of them were a blowout where one team took a big lead and the other came back to tie it up or to send it to overtime. They were all really close and could have gone either way. Really good defense by all 6 teams in all 3 games, I meant. I found in a couple of games the goalies were definitely good enough, but didn't stand on their head. But the defenses played well enough that in a lot of cases the goalies just didn't see shots. There were shots being blocked. There were shots being prevented. The goalies certainly made a number of very good saves, but for the most part, it was the defense in general that played really well. So those 3 games were entertaining. This weekend's games I didn't see as much of, but they were also pretty good as well. So that's my first awesome. Melissa, why don't you go next?
All right. So going back to last week's, I had Curtis Dixon's between his feet goal. It was one of those really awesome highlight reel goals that went in. But of course, if he would have missed, we all would have been talking about, oh, that was a stupid thing. Why did he do that? But it was just one of those really awesome kind of, I don't want to say it was a fluke goal because there's definitely some skill involved in doing that. But at the same time, probably 90% of the time, it's not going to go in. So which is it? But it was a highlight reel worthy goal. It was awesome. It was quick and it kind of surprised everybody. So that was pretty awesome. What did you have, Tyler?
Yeah, I'm also going back to a weekend ago. Those 3 games, all being 1 goal, were super exciting. The Georgia at Rochester, I had picked Georgia to win, so I was just like, "Come on, Georgia, you can do this!" And then they didn't, and I was actually heartbroken. But watching Georgia play that game, my specific awesome is in that 4th quarter. Like, they had long extended possessions where they would take shots and rebound off the goalie and they would get the loose ball. And they did that 3 or 4 times in a row. I mean, long, not just one extra try, but like a minute and a half long possessions. And defenses are just getting worn out and Georgia can really assert themselves in those situations. And they're doing it again today against Buffalo. So their hustle on ground balls is most impressive and really a difference maker for them and makes them scary to play against. So good job, Georgia, hustling on the Lucy's. Graham, what do you got?
I got that actually. I'll go straight to my third awesome. And my third awesome was Georgia playing today against Buffalo. I only saw the first half of the game, maybe 3/4 of it. But they were fighting really hard. They're fighting for loose balls, not giving up on plays. I thought the same thing as you. There were a number of plays where it looked like they were about to turn it over, and some of their offensive guys turned around and headed for the bench to get the defense on. and one of them didn't, whether it was Jordan Hall or Miles Thompson did it a number of times. I think Lyle Thompson did it once or twice as well. They stayed out there and just pestered the defense before they were able to get up the floor. And I don't know about more often than not, but a number of times they managed to get the ball away from the defense and turn it over again. And the offensive guys who had already headed off the floor turned around and came back, and they had another 30 seconds. And if all of them had just said, okay, well, there's a turnover, we'll get off the floor, that's it. And now they're on defense. But somebody was out there just giving it a little bit of extra, and it worked in their favor. And they did that a number of times. It was nice to see. They looked a lot more like the Georgia Swarm from last year, and it certainly worked in their favor as they beat Buffalo today. So that was good. Right, Melissa, what's next?
All right, so I'm going to stick with last week, and I want to highlight as my next awesome Joey Cupido's breakaway goal. It was one of those beautiful transition goals, but it was also very interesting to hear the banter between Shuchuk and John Grant Jr. about the goal, because it definitely gave some insight that we don't normally get since they're players and they played with one another. And hearing the frustration, you could hear come out mostly from John Grant Jr., because that's the kind of thing that when it goes wrong, frustrates the offense, which totally makes sense. But as a fan, watching those transition goals can be so exciting. And Joey has won Transition Player of the Year. What was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? So
something like that, yeah.
Him taking the shot really isn't as out of the norm as it might be, when, say, Pat Coyle would do it back in the day. Then you can understand. But to call him a defensive player taking an offensive shot seems very inaccurate. But it was a beautiful transition goal, and it definitely set the pace a little bit, and so it was exciting and fun to watch. What about you, Tyler? What's next?
I'm going to stick with the Swarm again, and I just love the way they celebrate their success. When somebody scores a goal, the people like Shane Jackson, and like he's their leader. He's got the A. Like, he's just like big smile, runs over, congratulates him. Everybody comes together and congratulates on the goal. And you watch other teams score the goal and like, hey, good job, we needed that or whatever. But like whether it's a goal tie the game, get back in the game, or they're way ahead, they score and they celebrate and they enjoy the experience. And that positive attitude can be very strong and lead them down this stretch of, everybody's based on wins tied in the East, and they need to break out of that tie, and a positive attitude will go a long way towards doing that. And so I love watching the Swarm enjoy and celebrate their success. Graham, what's next for you?
Yeah, the Swarm certainly always look like they're just having a lot of fun out there. And like you said, I mean, having a lot of fun out there is certainly one of the goals. And if you're losing a ton of games, it's harder to do. And obviously, if you're winning a ton of games, it's easier to have fun. But it's great to watch, especially when you see, Lyle and Miles playing together, and you can see when one of them scores based on being set up by the other, they get together afterwards, and it's almost like, that was great, that worked, or the thing that we practiced today was, and they just look so excited, and it's a lot of fun. My next awesome is entirely different, and that is from yesterday's game. I'm going to go with Andrew Suter. In general, I think he played a good game, but there was one particular play, I think might have been the third quarter. I can't even remember when. He blocked a shot. I don't know if it was an intentional thing or it just happened to hit him, but it hit him either in the lower calf or in the ankle or something like that, and he dropped. And play kept going, and he got back up, and he tried to play his position, and he was limping around. It looks like he was trying to put almost no pressure on that leg at all, but he stayed out there as long as he possibly could. And it looked like he might even have fallen down again and gotten back up. So clearly he was in serious pain. And finally the defensive shift ended. He managed to get off the floor, 5 minutes later, he's back out on the floor playing more defense, and he actually ran up in transition, and there was some sort of play up there. And then the whistle blew in the transition, or in that play, so play stopped, and he immediately started limping again. So clearly he's still in pain, but he's such a warrior, such a do whatever you can possibly do for your team kind of guy, that he's still out there even though he's in pain. And part of me thinks, well, he shouldn't be out there because he might be doing more damage to his leg, and God knows he's had enough leg trouble over the last few years. But the way he looks at it is, this is basically a playoff game. Every game going forward for them is a playoff game. They have to win them all. And if I can get out there and do whatever I can to help the team win, that's what I'm going to do. And if that means that I have to take the next couple of games off to let my ankle heal, then so be it if we get the win. And that's the definition of a team guy. And how would you not want him on your team? So good job to the Stealth for locking him up for another couple of years. Melissa, you're next.
All right, so I'm kind of combining a point I had last week and one that I put this week that was a little cheeky. Last week, I really thought the battle between Del Bianco and Ward was just awesome to watch. And I think I just have a goalie crush on Del Bianco because he is so much fun to watch. He's showing so much talent, and just some of the things he's doing, it's just, I love watching him. And I really, he's not on my team, but at the same time, I really like Ward, so I don't mind. But, you know, I like watching these two. I really like watching Bold, too. So having all these just really strong goalies in the league is just making me go, wow, I love this. Because for a little while there, we had some bad goalies in the league. And it's so exciting to watch who is in the league right now. It is so tight. And there's so much talent. And I'm just loving watching these guys. I mean, some of those crazy saves that they're making. I mean, even Nick Rose, he had the bounce that, you know, hit the pipe and hit him, and he somehow managed to stop it. It's just, wow. I love this. You know, in the past, you know, I loved Eric Miller when he played for the Mammoth because he was exciting to watch because he wasn't afraid to come out of net, but the guy was like 6'5" or 6'3" or something. He was a huge guy. So him coming out of net was a little different story. And then you had guys like Bob Watson and, you know, Tugger. It's just so many goalies that we've watched over the years, and this new crop is just so exciting. So I guess awesome, I will do general is I definitely have a crush on Del Bianco because he's playing awesome, but I would kind of extend that. I think I just have a crush on the goalies in the league right now because I am loving watching most of them. So, what about you, Tyler?
I agree that watching Del Bianco is exciting, and because he had so much success as a junior, and he took his little while to make his adjustment to the wider nets of the NLL, but he seems to be there. And Frank Ciliano seemed like he was a phenomenal goalie for getting the job done more or less for Calgary, but Del Bianco is energized the Roughnecks to another level of confidence with him back there. And so Ciliano loses his job, but I think Ciliano is good enough that they'll have a job next year in either Philly or San Diego. Probably San Diego because of the geography the NL plays, where Ciliano's a West Coast person. So he'd probably be a high draft pick coming up. So it'll be very interesting to see that move and confirm that Ciliano is a good goalie, and he's worth getting picked up by one of the new teams. All right, my specific one here is Rochester's effort yesterday in the second half against Calgary. The games started an hour apart, so I watched the first half of Rochester in Calgary leading up to my Stealth game, and it was 10-4 at the half. They kind of went back and forth the first few goals. It was maybe 3-3 or 4-4. No, it wasn't 4-4. It wasn't that much of a run. It was like 3-3. And then Calgary just got hot and started taking everything to the goal and scoring, chased Matt Vince out of the goal in the second quarter, and looked impressive. It's like, well, all right, time for the Stealth game. We'll just flip over, and I knew that I had missed my pick for the week, but that's all right. Go watch the team I prefer to watch. And then halftime of the Stealth game, I flip it back, and it's 12-14 with about a minute left. So Rochester came roaring back. So my awesome is whatever happened in that second half that I did not see. I just know it had to have happened because the score ended up being the last goal was like 1 second left. So it's a 1-goal game, but it wasn't like they got that 1 goal with enough time left to really have a chance to tie it. But whatever happened when I turned off that game, good job, Rochester. It was most impressive to be on the road and get back in that game like they did. Good effort by them. Graham, you're next awesome.
Actually, I'm going to continue with that one. The fact that Rochester came back and tied that game, or not tied that game, but got within one late. Unfortunately, was too late. But it reminded me at the time, just watching the players, of, and this is going back a long time. It reminded me of the 2001 final in Toronto, which was my first year of watching lacrosse at all. I had no idea what lacrosse was before that. But I became a Rock season ticket holder that year, watched all the games that year. They went to the championship again for the 3rd straight year. And they played the Philadelphia Wings. And the Dallas Elliott just played out of his mind. Bob Watson played very well as well, and it ended up being a pretty low-scoring game, though I don't remember the actual score. But I think it was something like, I think it ended up like 9-8 or 8-7 or something like this. But what I remember specifically what that reminded me of was the very end of the game. The Rock were losing by 2, and I believe everybody in the ACC was standing at this point. So there's only a minute left, and we're losing by 2. Okay, well, we need to score a goal very quickly and then get possession again and score again. So we're all on the edge of our seats watching this, and after some period of time, and nobody knew how long it was, the Rock scored a goal, and we all cheered, and everybody looked at the scoreboard and saw that there was 1.3 seconds left. And then we realized, okay, we got the 1 goal. Now we need the other one, but there's only 1 second left, so we're done. And that's exactly what I saw in this game. All the Nighthawks were zipping around the net. The ball went in. They all put their arms up. They all looked at the clock, and they all kind of deflated, just like, okay, we needed 1 more goal, and we only have 1 second to do it, and that's it. And so that it kind of reminded me of the 2001 final when I did the same thing. So I guess, was that awesome? Not particularly, but it certainly was an exciting game. So we'll go with that as my awesome. I think I'm out of awesomes now. So Melissa, you can continue.
All right. So we're kind of keeping with Rochester, but we're more focusing on last weekend because the 4th quarter of the Rochester-Georgia game was exciting. Oh my gosh, just edge of your seat. Who was going to take this game? And it was so defensive before that, so low scoring. And then just the back half of that 4th quarter was so exciting that it was just, that's what you love about lacrosse, at least box lacrosse. It's never over till it's over. You never know who's going to win. And just like you were saying with Rochester and Calgary, 30 more seconds might even have been a tie game going into overtime. And that's just so exciting. You just don't have that in so many sports because a 3-goal lead in hockey often spells the end of the game. It's so fast paced and it can change, and you can have 3 goals scored in a minute and a half, and it's crazy. So for me, it was that last half of that game, but the whole last weekend was pretty awesome. I mean, having 3 games, 2 of them go to overtime, all 3 decided by 1 goal. I love that stuff. What about you, Tyler? Do you have anything else?
I am all out of awesomes for this week, or 2 weeks, as it were.
I still got a few from last week. Apparently,
Go for it.
There was only 3 games, but I was note happy. I also had Rob Hellier's opening goal. It was just one of those blink and you miss it goals. It was so quick, and even on replay, you kind of had to go, wait, what happened there? Wait, what happened? Rewind it a few times. So that one was really awesome. And, I complain an awful lot about the feed quality of the replays, but the Toronto-New England game, I don't know what they did that was different, but it was the sharpest looking game I have seen in the past 2-3 years. Whatever they switched over, it was so sharp, so clear. It was beautiful. I mean, it truly was. And so I have to give definitely some props to that. The Toronto-New England game, the first 3 quarters was really exciting. The fourth quarter was not as exciting. And then it was exciting that Vancouver made more of a game of it than I expected. So in some ways that was also not awesome. But we'll focus on the awesome part, that Vancouver had some moments of really good play. So do you want to kick us off with the not awesomes, Graham?
All right, I actually have one more awesome that I remembered while you were talking, and that was from this afternoon. And as listeners know probably by now, that I'm a big stickler for name pronunciation. And so I write my name pronunciation guide every year and talk about it on Twitter a lot and that sort of thing. So when I was watching the Buffalo Georgia game this afternoon, and we had Mitch Belisle and Mark Zinno doing the play-by-play and the color, not necessarily in that order. They mentioned Nick Weiss a couple of times, and Zach Haywires. And Haywires, I kind of give him a pass on because that's how everybody said it last year. Apparently it was wrong, but that's how we all said it. And Steven Stamp talked to Zach himself, and I actually got some tweets from his dad earlier this year saying, I don't know where that came from. It's never been right. It's actually hair wires. And so somebody, I think it actually was Steven Stamp, tweeted to Mitch Belisle during the game saying, hey, just so you know, it's hair wires, not haywires. And Belisle read the tweet, and I think he responded at halftime saying, here's what we have. We have the Bandits guide that they gave us, and it says haywires on it. And it says Weiss instead of Weiss. And Stamper corrected him. And in the second half of the game, they were pronouncing them as hair wires and Nick Weiss. So the fact that they were paying attention, the fact that they got the names wrong is not what bothers me. What bothers me is when they don't bother checking to see if they got the names wrong. And the fact that they had a list that they were paying attention to and going by is great. That's what I want. What I'd really like is if the list was correct, and in this case it wasn't. But once they found out it wasn't correct, they changed it. So huge props to Mitch Belisle and Mark Zinno for paying attention to Twitter during the game. For one, that's kind of cool. But for when it's pointed out to them that they got it wrong, they changed it. So that was pretty cool to see that basically in real time. So props to those guys for that. So that was my last awesome. And I guess, Melissa, will go back to you for the first not awesome.
Okay, so I'm going to kick off, since today is March 18th and we had several St. Patrick's Day games. Just a little complaining. It's Paddy, not T's. Okay, this is 100%. There's no room for this. And it's because it comes from the Irish of Padra, which is P-A with an accent, D-R-A-I-G. That is the Irish form for Patrick. Paddy is the derivative of Patricia. Okay? So you are calling Patrick a girl. It's offensive to anyone with Irish in them, and especially those who are Irish. And if you want, you can even read more on paddynotpaddy.com. That's D's the first one, T's in the second one, and they will explain it in more detail. But seriously, if you're in the marketing department for any of this stuff, make sure you get this right, because it actually is offensive to many people. Okay, and yeah, I'm probably a little more aware than some, and I know when I was younger, I got it wrong too. But, you know, we're more educated, we have access to more information. Let's get this right, okay? It's either St. Patrick's Day or you use D's, right? You never say Paddy with T's. That's a girl's name. Okay, so I'm off my soapbox with my little Irish self. What about you, Tyler?
Ooh-wee. I'm going to go with back to the previous weekend. The last, I don't know, was it 5 seconds of the Georgia at Rochester game. Georgia had a final possession, set up their shot and missed. Ball went wide enough that Rochester had time to pick it up and run down the other direction to try and get their game-winning goal. And Cody Jamieson off the bench first for Rochester, trailed by a couple Swarm defenders, including the Noble brother that plays for them. And I'm sorry,
Jason.
Noble brother. Jason. God, I was guessing that. Just Noble. They're not on my teams. They barely exist to me. So I don't care about that difference. Jason Noble, as the camera pans into the action of the fast break, you see Noble on top of Jameson from behind, and they call a holding penalty, and Rochester gets man up to go into overtime. And it sounds amazing, but my not awesome here is that it wasn't in the shot, but the way that Noble was complaining, the gamesmanship that Jameson did of, I got in front of my guy, he's running behind me, I'm just going to hit the brakes, he plows into me, they're going to call him for pulling me down, and they did. And so Jameson just caused the penalty. If you're a Rochester fan, or in general cheering for Cody Jamieson, you're probably thinking that was super smart and brilliant, but it wasn't polite, I guess. I don't know. It wasn't in true sportsmanship of a way to handle yourself. And it kind of ended up, now it's been a week, I can't remember if they ended up scoring during the power play in the time in the game to win, or if they did it after that. But it made all the difference, and it is part of the game. But I didn't like that it was part of the game, and I wish it hadn't happened that way. So I had to call it out. But it's a tough one. So that was my first not awesome. Graham, how about you?
I'm actually looking at the score of that game, and I don't know if there was a mistake somewhere, but we do have a penalty on Jason Noble at 15 minutes of the fourth quarter for holding. And Rochester scored a minute and 30 seconds into overtime, but it's not listed as a power play goal.
Should be.
So, that's probably because Billy D. Smith was serving 2 5-minute majors. So that actually brought it back down to 4-on-4.
Huh.
That's probably why. So it wasn't actually a power play goal, but they had Rochester was already killing a penalty at the time.
Okay, thank you.
So that's why. Okay. Not awesome. I'm going to go with last week's Rock offense. As we saw earlier in the season with Tom Schreiber, they were close to unstoppable. They had 4 games straight where they averaged 20-plus goals. And even the games they didn't score 20, their offense, other than the first 2 games where they kind of didn't really know what they were doing, once they got it figured out, they were unstoppable. Without him, they were quite stoppable, as we saw last week. Adam Jones had 0 points, and I think he had either 0 points or 0 goals in the previous game, and they said it was the first time in his career that's ever happened, or at least the first time in several years. Dan Lintner was a healthy scratch again, but Phil Caputo had been moved from the defense back up to the offense. He had 0 points. Kieran McArdle had 0 points. So they still hadn't quite figured out what to do without Tom Schreiber. Now that said, they did score a last-minute goal to tie the game and send it to overtime. So they did come back in that game and give themselves a chance to win. So that was good. But other than that, they just kind of didn't have it last week. Now, this week they played a lot better. They managed to score 12 goals and beat New England. So they were much better. All of the offensive players on the Rock scored at least once, and that included Lintner. And I had the game right here. So yeah, Hellier, Jones, McArdle, Hickey, Lintner, and Reinhold all scored. And Caputo scored, but I think he was actually playing defense again. Damon Edwards got 1. Challen Rogers and Brody Merrill and Sheldon Burns all got assists. So the transition was working as well. So this week, they played pretty well. Last week, not so good. Melissa, what's your next one? You are on mute.
Yes, I am on mute. Okay, so my next, I'm trying not to bring my attention to that I was typing something. So my next one, and I'm a little fuzzy which game it was, so forgive me. I was trying to look it up because I thought it was the Toronto New England game, but there was a boarding incident, and that was really kind of my not awesome because those can be so dangerous, and it looked like a really nasty hit. And as we know, sometimes they can be played up a little bit. Players can definitely make them look worse than they are, but it was nasty. It was a dangerous hit, and I'm trying to remember when it was, which game it was, because I thought it was Toronto. Maybe one of you two might remember that, but it was it was kind of behind the crease type of thing, or behind the net, not the crease.
It's not ringing any bells with me.
They were closer to the camera than far, but it was just one of those things that there was 3 players involved, and the one guy hit the guy, he went forward into the board, and then he turned and was dealing with the guy behind him. And I can remember the incident, but I don't know. It was that's the problem with watching back-to-back games sometimes, because I pretty much spend my whole day just one game after the next, and they blend in a little bit. But it looked nasty at the time, but maybe that was my perception, and it didn't look as bad to either of you. But I know there was a call on it, but usually those get a worse call than, say, roughing. And so I'm not seeing anything that pops up out of me. So, but that was my not awesome. Is the boarding is definitely really a dangerous thing, especially in this league where these guys are really part-time. So it's even worse than in hockey where they're paid millions of dollars. So that's my not awesome. And even though I rambled about it and didn't provide details. So what about you, Tyler?
I will briefly ramble about the Stealth effort last night against Colorado. The Stealth had a bye week, chance to really get things set with the new assistant coaches on offense and defense, and come out with renewed focus. And then they played pretty much the same as always. They started out okay, not as slow as they had in the past, but once Colorado got a lead, they never gave it up. And the Stealth offense continues to just shoot from the outside. Anthony Malcolm had a couple nice flashes of driving to the middle and getting goals, but I just not impressed. Like, you watch the Swarm and they have multiple people on backside creases trying to get passes across through the dunks. Stealth have anything close to that. And even Buffalo, like, they'll move around to the middle. They'll even drive to the middle and try and create stuff, and Stealth just drive in the outside lanes. And it's completely unimpressive. And I can't handle it. So I want the Stealth to do better. And I don't know what else to do. So, Graham, you can give me a not awesome.
Actually, no, I can't. I'm all out of not awesomes for this week. I saw most of the games this weekend, or at least parts of most of them. And a lot of the times when I'm watching a game live, I'll keep the show notes up. And if I see something particularly awesome or not awesome, I'll make a note of it. And sometimes I'll look and say, okay, I've got like 15 awesomes and 15 not awesomes from that game alone. So I'll have to trim it down a little bit. And this time I didn't do any of that. So there's probably a few things that I should have written down somewhere, but I didn't. And now I don't remember any of them. So we'll just say this was an awesome couple of weeks. And that's it for me. So Melissa, what do you have next?
All right. So I have out for last week. It was announced during the Toronto game that, ouch, Toronto is second in the league for short goals allowed and went 0-8 on the power play the week before. So, ow, my goodness. So that was kind of my not awesome, because that was one of those stats that they threw out that was like, ooh, that's really not good. But Toronto's definitely had a relatively decent season so far. So not as bad. And then since you don't have many, and I don't know how Tyler is, I think I'll just go ahead and combine a couple because they're somewhat related.
Do it.
I had the stealth, and there are too many min penalties. Wow. They were talking about that. Jake Elliott, I think, was talking about that this yesterday's game. And they have a lot of those penalties. It seems to be a big issue for them. And the number of them that they have really can alter a game. So they really need to pay a little more attention on how many of their guys they have on the floor, whoever's manning those doors, because that's just one of those costly penalties that is really unnecessary. And, it's one thing if you're getting caught for it, once every few games or something, but it sounds like they're getting several of them every game. So maybe Tyler can speak a little bit more to that, but definitely some issues there for both those teams. What about you, Tyler?
I don't want to talk about those.
Sorry.
One thing I will talk about is Friday night, 2 games for the league. And I've mentioned this every once in a while when it comes up. 2 games, only 2 games, and they start at the exact same time. So you have to pick which one you want to watch. Even a 30-minute offset. Have the league come down and say, look, we need you to start 30 minutes later. One of you starts at 7, one of you starts at 7:30. Please. Is a better fan experience for all those people who are not live in the stadiums. And for half the people, half meaning they get to see there are people of each arena, but for one of the arenas, it's even better because it was Friday evening and you had to be at the arena, rushing there. And if you get there just a half hour later after being at work all week, that's an easier experience for people. So if the league only has 2 games, or even if they have more than 2 games, but you have 2 games starting at the exact same time, I would appreciate a half-hour offset so I could pick which one. I know which one I'll start, pick which one I want to watch for about 3 quarters, and then I can watch the end of the other one. And it's a better experience, better use of my time. So I'm selfishly asking for the league to spend my time better by offsetting those games by a half hour. Melissa, back to you.
Well, and even offsetting it by half an hour, sometimes that can make it so you can watch 2 quarters, not even that final quarter, because we've definitely seen some games that are a little longer. We've definitely seen some that go very quickly through those quarters. Yeah, it would be nice. But for me, I watch them on replay, so I have different issues, which is what my next Not Awesomes are about. So last week, heading into, because I watch them on replay because my Saturdays are so crazy, and Fridays I don't really watch any of those games. I came into it because Graham was talking about how phenomenal the feed of the Twitter game of the week was. And so I came in admittedly with high expectations, and it was crappy. It was horrible. It was so grainy and pixely, and I'm going, wait a sec. Graham said that this game was really good quality, and that wasn't the Toronto-New England game. Or not Toronto-New England game, no, it was the Toronto.
This was the Rocknet.
But which one was the Rochester? It was Rochester.
This was last week. Where did it go?
The Rochester, Georgia game, I think.
Yes, it was. Yeah, because I remember being surprised that the feed that was coming out of Rochester was not flawless, but really, really good. I mean, it was high definition. It was just great. And considering the feed that we've seen coming out of Rochester in the past, I was very impressed. So I didn't look to see what the NLL TV feed looked like, but I've seen other people complain about that the Twitter feed and the NLL TV feed of the same game are different qualities. So it might have been the same sort of thing, that the feed that they used to record the game and therefore is the one you're seeing on the replay was the crappy one, which I don't understand at all. And I don't see how that, unless they're using 2 sets of cameras or something to do this, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and it's a really bad fan experience. I mean, for me, I came in expecting, hey, this is going to be really awesome. And instead it was the Toronto-New England game that was just beautiful. That was how Graham described the Rochester, Georgia game. But it was so pixelated that I almost turned it off a few times because it was really bad quality. And so I was probably even more frustrated because I came into it hearing how great it looked. And I was like, no, it's not. And then my other issue was the audio echo that we had in the fourth quarter of the Toronto New England game, because that was really obnoxious. So it's one of those things that, yeah, we keep complaining about these, but really by now we shouldn't have so many of these quality issues to even complain about, because we're trying to attract new fans, and new fans are not going to be as patient as us older fans because we've been around the league a lot. I mean, I remember watching the games on B2. So is what we have now better than that? Yeah, by a long shot. But at the same time, technology has also come so much farther that some of these issues are even more frustrating because they shouldn't still be issues. So that is kind of my 2 cents and my gripe of the week. What about you, Tyler? Anything else?
No, I am all out of not awesomes. Any more for you?
Yeah, just New England, how they played the fourth quarter, because they took a really exciting game and made it kind of not so good. But that's a different comment. But yeah, I think that's it for me. You want to take us away, Graham?
All right, we've got a couple of other extra topics to talk about before we get to our predictions for the last couple of weeks and for next week. The first one tomorrow is the trade deadline. I think it's 3 p.m. It might be noon, but I think it's 3 p.m. Actually, it's probably 3 p.m. Eastern and noon Pacific, so that's why I'm getting confused. But there are rumors that the big blockbuster trades we saw a couple of weeks ago involving Sean Evans and Callum Crawford and Dan Dawson are not done. There are rumors that Dan Dawson might be on his way to Toronto. And if Tom Schreiber is out for extended periods of time, I haven't heard any updates on when he might be back, but I think they were originally saying end of March, mid April. So definitely in time for playoffs. But the Rock may decide, well, we would like somebody to replace him in the interim anyway. And if you're looking for an impact player on the right side, Dan Dawson is a pretty good choice. The question is, what's going to go back to Saskatchewan? They already have Toronto's first round pick for the next 2 years from the Adam Jones deal. Toronto does have a second round pick and a fourth round pick this year, which is what Saskatchewan paid for Dawson just a couple of weeks ago. But if Toronto's, I don't know if desperate is the right word, but if Toronto is really interested in acquiring Dawson, Saskatchewan may be asking for more than a second and a fourth. And so that's, I don't know what's going to happen there. I guess we've got less than 24 hours until we hear the results of that, but it's still fun to talk about. So I guess we'll go over both of them, because the other one is Corey Small, and I think we've mentioned this on the show before, that he is moving back east this summer after, I thought it was 3 or 4 years playing for the Victoria Shamrocks. I believe it's actually like 7 years. And I think he's been the captain for most of that time. But he has decided to play in the East this summer because this is where where he lives, where his family's from, St. Catharines area, I believe. So if he's moving back here in the summer, even if he hasn't actually requested a trade from the Stealth, he probably wouldn't say no to one. So if I'm the Stealth, who are, when I wrote this, it was 111, it's now 112, you might be looking at trying to get draft picks for Corey Small if you can. He was worth 2 first-round picks 3 years ago. Last year, he was an MVP candidate. He's still doing pretty well this year, not at the same level as last year, but still pretty well. Can they still get 2 first-round picks for him? And again, they're not getting them from the Rock because they don't have any for a couple of years. But there are several other teams in the East who would be happy to have Corey Small on their team. Melissa, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on either of these two guys?
That's interesting, especially with, would the Rush actually be willing to make any trades? They're playing really well right now. Do they even need Dawson? I mean, for his age, he's still very talented and still making an impact. So he would be very valuable to another team. But as Rush, do you want to potentially give another team that weapon, even if you're getting something in return? It's hard to say. It'll be interesting to watch that one. I think the Corey Small one makes a little more sense. As you mentioned, the South aren't doing very well. This is probably a season that it might make more sense for them to make some valuable trades to set them up going into the expansion draft, especially with players that they might lose anyway. It's always hard to say because at this point, teams are, if they're in a position that they're willing to give somebody up, even if they're getting somebody, then they may not want to. And the other teams, they're just as afraid of giving a team a very valuable weapon and not getting something in return, or, so it's always interesting to watch these last minute deals. That's all I can add. What about you, Tyler?
Right. Starting with Dan Dawson, I'd say he was brought in because Curtis Knight was injured. If he's going to be healthy, they could let Dan Dawson go again. If he's not going to be healthy, they should hold on to him and have a solid third righty to go through the playoffs. Similar equation for Toronto. If they don't feel that Tom Schreiber is going to come back this season in a meaningful way, that should determine their need to pursue Dan Dawson harder. I think if the offense for the Rock had struggled this weekend, again, they would be pushing pretty hard for that. But they scored 12 goals and they got the win. And so there's probably less panic, less concern on there. Like, okay, like maybe they had to find the right combination of players and to weather this time that they're missing Tom Schreiber. But if they know that Schreiber is not coming back 100%, then they could push for that. On the other side of the coast, or the other coast, we have Corey Small in Vancouver, and I posited last weekend the idea of Jesse King for Corey Small, and who would say no to that trade? Corey Small, MVP caliber, but a little bit older. Jesse King, younger, but a Victoria kid, and I know that like Reese Dutch loves playing with him, and so they could bring him back home west, because right now I don't know if he's living on the East Coast because he's young. That the younger guys can definitely do that easier, and so they maybe just have him hold up in Atlanta all the time. He's not commuting back and forth, but long term, he's the kind of player that if he reaches any sort of potential that he has, teams want to bring home, in quotes. And but why not just do that now and lock up a young, very, very promising, and he's been successful in indoor in the WLA playing with the Shamrocks, and just do that now. And you don't get draft picks for the future necessarily, because 2 could be better than 1, but you know what you're getting with Jesse King. And I think it would be a smart move. Otherwise, I think he'll go to Philadelphia for some picks. But he's got to get traded, is my opinion, because he has the most worth. Not because he is not producing, but just because he's going out east and he has great value. Graham, any thoughts now that we've given you more information?
Yeah, the Small for King deal is interesting. Obviously, they're both high producers, and as you said, King is from the West Coast, so that'll help. He's also, I was trying to look up how old Corey Small is. I'm guessing he's late 20s, maybe 30. I don't think he's quite 30.
31, 32.
Is he?
Okay. Yeah, maybe late 30s. Late 20s. Bah.
He is 31.
There you go.
In fact, he will be 32 this coming week.
Congratulations.
And Jesse King,
happy birthday, you're traded.
Jesse King is 25. So, yeah, so you if you make that move, you're getting kind of a commodity that you know about. Obviously, he doesn't have as much NLL experience, but like you said, if he's played for the Shamrocks, then there's a number of Shamrocks players on the Stealth who will know him and know he'll fit right in fairly quickly, I would imagine. And you're getting a guy who's 6 years younger, so that's a plus as well. So, like I said, within 24 hours, we'll know if any or all of these deals were done and if we were anywhere close on any of them. The other thing I wanted to bring up was a penalty that was given today to Sean Evans of the Bandits. And that was for wearing leggings that had the Nike symbol on them or the Nike logo on them. And this has come up a number of times in the past. And somebody actually mentioned that Miles Thompson, I think, got a penalty earlier this year for doing the same thing, whether it was leggings or I think it might have been shoes. And so the league has a deal with Reebok, and part of that deal
It's
is that
New Balance now. Reebok was
it is
the
New
other one.
Balance.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're right. They did have a deal with Reebok at one point, but I guess they change sponsors every now and again. But in any case, the rule book clearly states that if you are not wearing, or if you're wearing equipment that has a logo of some other company on it, then you can be penalized. And so they gave Sean Evans a some sort of equipment penalty today because he was wearing leggings that had the Nike swoosh on them. So a lot of people were saying, well, that's Bush League rule, and I don't know. I guess you could argue that it is. Here's my reason why I don't think it is. I mean, it's all about sponsorship, and people are saying, well, I actually just got a tweet from somebody just minutes ago saying sponsors are dictating the rules, and the league should be focused on the growth of the game and helping existing teams with marketing for growth, not managing leggings. Well, I mean, it's not specifically about leggings, obviously, but yeah, sponsors dictate the rules in the sense that New Balance has come to the league and said, look, we're going to sponsor you. We're going to give you money. We're going to give you equipment. We're going to supply you with all of this stuff. That is growing the game right there. But they're going to say, for all of this stuff that we're going to do for you, you need to say every now and again, New Balance is the official sponsor of the NLL or official equipment provider or whatever it is. And you need to make sure that players aren't running around with Reebok logos or Nike logos or logos of our competition. Because if we want to see, like, we're giving you all this stuff, we want to make sure that our logo is all over the place. That's why we're doing it. So that is growing the league. And if the league has to make that rule and just say, okay, fine, we'll take all your money, we'll take all of your equipment and make sure our players wear it, then we have to crack down on players wearing other stuff. All the players know this. This is not a secret. This is not some weird, obscure rule that they pulled out of nowhere that the players are going, what are you talking about? They all know this because they've all seen it happen. And so if Sean Evans goes out there wearing leggings with a Nike swoosh on it, he knows what he's doing. He knows he could be paying for this with a penalty. So to come out later and say, well, that's not fair, they shouldn't be doing that. Maybe they shouldn't, but if you know this is a rule and you know you're breaking the rule, you got to take you're taking the chance, and you got to know that if you get a penalty for it, you can't complain about it because you knew about it going in. So that's my thoughts. Melissa, what do you think?
You know, there is a lot of money involved in this, and I don't consider it a Bush League thing because there are other leagues. I want to say even the UFC has some non-compete type stuff. It makes sense. And as you said, it's not like the players don't know this. And it's not like the league even says you're absolutely not allowed to wear this stuff. They just have to cover the logos. And sometimes their opponents pull this out strategically and complain to the refs, hey, the game is on the line. Could use a penalty right now. So and so has different shoes on that are not, okay. And so in that respect, maybe you can say it's a little Bush League. But the fact that this rule is enforced, no, that's smart. Because if you're not enforcing it, then why should these companies pay all this big money for these sponsorships? Because that's the whole point. So I would say how it's enforced maybe falls under that Bush League, but definitely not the rule itself. It makes sense. It's not exclusive to this. And I know, what was it? Probably about 5-6 years ago, there was issues because I think the NFL was looking at mandating something similar, and you had all those players that had their individual sponsorships. And so there was discussion on, okay, how is this going to work when this player is getting paid to wear this gear? And I remember there was a whole bunch of stuff there, but I will admit I didn't follow it very closely, so I don't know how everything played out because I don't watch the NFL anymore. But that's beside the point. I think, yeah, this is a rule that should be enforced. It's not like players don't know it, and it's not like there aren't ways around it. I mean, all he would have had to do was sew a patch over it, or put a piece of tape. Like, come on, there's duct tape, there's medical tape. It's not that hard to cover it up. So I think it's just a case of Evans has gotten away with it in enough games, and his opponent's team decided, hey, let's bring attention to this. What do you think, Tyler?
So much to unpack here. But you're right. The NFL has this exact same rule. The NFL for a while was sponsored by Reebok, and if you didn't have your own player sponsorship agreement with some other vendor, you just wore Reebok shoes. And now Nike makes their stuff, so you don't notice it as often. But the NFL has this exact same rule. If you don't have a personal sponsorship deal, you wear certain gear. You're required. So the NLL is playing to the same level as kind of the biggest sports leagues out there. I remember the game we talked about where Miles Thompson got a penalty earlier this year. It was at Calgary. I ranted for a moment, like they're allowed to wear their own stuff. Well, last year they were. Maybe this year they did that for 1 year. They're not anymore, because I noticed that Jeremy Thompson was wearing New Balance shoes a couple weeks ago. But he has his own line of shoes, like the Thompson Brother Lacrosse shoes from Nike. They wore them last year. Apparently this year they can't, so the rule changed. I was not expecting that to be just a 1 year rule. I can't really remember a time where the players didn't have sponsorship, definitely on shoes, and because the jerseys, it all gets bundled together. Maybe back 05, 06, they could use their own sticks. But at least since 2009, Reebok was the sponsor, and the players had 2 sticks to choose from Reebok, and there was no variety, no choice. The best they could do was put their own pocket in and tweak it. And nobody in the right mind, I've never seen a person buy a Reebok stick aside from 3rd and 4th grade kids I coached. And they're like, well, that's bundled up and it's ready to go, and it looked okay. But any player at any level, no college players, no MLL players, we're picking a Reebok stick as that's my weapon. That's the one I want to use. And like, no, it's one I'm forced to use. Like, I try to put a good pocket in and hope it works out. Nowadays, players can use whatever stick they want, I guess, as long as they got that individual contract. We're watching games, and every game, every quarter, you get a commercial of Curtis Dixon using his Warrior Warp pocket. That's not a New Balance. I think maybe they're at the same parent company at the highest level between Warrior and New Balance. But like, players get some choice now. And it's like you said, Melissa, it's how the bills get paid, and it's not a new rule. So to be surprised by this or complaining about it, it's like you're a professional. At some point, you should know the rules of your job, and I got to hold you accountable for that. So yeah, that's my rant and raving on this topic.
All right, so it looks like the 3 of us are in agreement anyway. All right, let's move on to our predictions for the past couple of weeks. Okay, 2 weeks ago, what did we have? We all got Colorado over Calgary, and Melissa got Rochester over Georgia, and Tyler got New England over Toronto, and that was it. So I was 1 and 2. You guys were both 2 and 1. This weekend, we all got Saskatchewan over Buffalo, and we all got Georgia over Buffalo. Sorry, Buffalo. And what else happened? I got Colorado, as did Melissa. Melissa got Calgary by herself, and Tyler got Toronto by himself. So we had, I was 3 and 2. Tyler was also 3 and 2, and Melissa was 4 and 1. So overall, we have Melissa in the lead still at 36 and 20. I'm behind her at 33 and 23. And Tyler has hit the 500 mark at 28 and 28.
Woohoo!
So
I'm
nice
going to
job,
Sizzler.
Tyler. And now we hit week 16. Can you believe we are 16 weeks into the season? All right, Melissa, as always, you can go first with your picks.
Well, I think we at least learned one thing the past 2 weeks. I cannot seem to pick a New England-Toronto game. I was wrong both directions. So apparently whatever I pick, you just need to pick the opposite. But at least I don't have another one of those games this week, so hopefully my picks are better. With Buffalo, New England, I went back and forth on this one a lot because New England has had some really good moments, and then they really fell off, and then Buffalo has kind of been that way. So New England has back-to-back games against different opponents, and so I'm pretty sure I'm picking these wrong, but I think I'm going to stick with them. Although I'm second guessing. I think I'm going to actually change my pick. I had Buffalo winning over New England, but I think I'm going to pick New England to take both those games. So we are going to go with New England. I'm just not confident with Buffalo's goalie situation, and I think that it might actually play that out just a little bit more. So I'm going to pick New England for both games. Georgia, we've seen very hit or miss. Don't know which team's going to show up. I really like what I've seen out of Calgary. I think they have a fire under them. I think the fact that Toronto is traveling gives Calgary the edge. I'm going to pick Colorado over Vancouver. I think that's self-explanatory. And same with the Rush over Rochester. What about you, Tyler?
All right. Yeah, Buffalo at New England. Buffalo's lost a couple games in a row at least. They are not trending in an upward direction. And somehow that Sean Evans trade hasn't just kicked him into a high gear. So I'm picking New England to beat Buffalo. Then New England has to get on the road and go down Georgia. Georgia is trending in the right direction. I mean, that close loss to Rochester a couple weeks ago, but the last month, I think they're 3-4, 3-1, 3 out of 4. And so I'm picking Georgia to win that game. Toronto at Calgary's my hardest one of the week. Calgary's good at home. But Toronto, they had some good flashes this weekend. And we'll see. Let's go ahead and call that they'll be excited to have Dan Dawson as their newest forward. And they'll beat Calgary because of that. But I don't know. That's a hard pick for me, but I'm going to go ahead and pick Toronto, regardless of the fake Dan Dawson trade we made up. Vancouver at Colorado. Last weekend, I picked Vancouver with my heart because I needed them to win. This weekend, screw it. Colorado's going to win. And finally, Rochester at the Rush. And didn't mention earlier, but I love the thing that the Nighthawks Twitter handle did, where in the Hawks name, they strung the 4 W's together when they're on their win streak. That's pretty ingenious. But there's nothing to do with picking this game. You're going to go play the Rush, and the Rush are really good. And you only have 6 wins, Rochester. So good luck with that. I'm going to pick the Rush to win. Graham, how about you?
All right. Looks like I'm by myself in the Buffalo-New England game, and I'm not 100% confident on that one anyway. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Buffalo on this one. They have lost 4 straight, but kind of like the stealth, honestly, that they've lost 4 straight, but they haven't been blown out. They haven't played terrible. They've played okay, just not quite good enough to win in those games. And we saw a little more of the Sean Evans that Buffalo was hoping to get today. And so I think he's starting to gel with his new team, and we might see him break out a little bit more next weekend. So I'm going to go for Buffalo. New England at Georgia. The East is close enough that it's hard to pick one team to lose both games in the weekend, though I guess Buffalo did it this weekend. But I'm going to go with Georgia. I like the way they looked today. They looked pretty solid. Closer, like I said, to the Swarm that we saw last year. And yeah, I'm going to pick them to beat the Black Bulls. Toronto, Calgary, and this one hurts, but I'm going to go for Calgary in this one. The Rock looked really good this past weekend in New England, and it looked like they've kind of said, okay, without Tom Schreiber, we can do this, we can do that, we can adjust things this way, and they've kind of finally figured that stuff out. Now it's only been one game where the offense has played really well without Schreiber, so that's not to say that they've turned the corner and now they're going to be great all the rest of the way. But they know it can be done, so that's going to help their confidence. But Calgary's been playing really well recently. Del Bianco's been insane for most of the season. Actually, I guess he didn't start as the starter in Calgary, but since he basically stole that position from Giuliano and has not given it back, he's been outstanding. So I'm going to go for Calgary there and kind of hope that I'm wrong. Vancouver, Colorado, got to go with Colorado because they're playing Vancouver. And Saskatchewan and Rochester isn't quite as cut and dried as it might have been in the past because Rochester's playing really well. Saskatchewan has been playing really well most of the season, but I think during the game the other day, somebody said that Saskatchewan would have to give up like the next 5-6 goals or whatever it is to lose this game. And a year ago, that would have been completely not even possible. This year, they did it once, as in they had a big lead and gave it up and lost, and they almost did it the next week. So while they're still playing really well, and I still think they're going to win, it's not quite as well as Saskatchewan, so obviously they're going to win. Not quite as cut and dried as it might have been last year. So I guess we're all going for the Rush. We're all going for the Mammoth, and everything else is kind of jumbled up. So we should have some interesting numbers next week. And that was probably a pretty long episode because we had 2 weeks of stuff to cover. So so I guess that'll do it for this week's episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.